My name is Ivan Weiss. I'm a headshot and portrait photographer based in London. I guess I was always going to be a photographer, but I narrowed it down to portrait photography a few years back, around 2015, 2016, when I discovered the work of Peter Hurley, and I got into his whole shooting headshots. And that's where I realized that the thing that I like most about photography is working with people. So I guess it's really natural from there. If you're a photographer and you like working with people, you end up as a portrait photographer. There's a significant difference in workflow in what I consider a headshot compared to what I consider a portrait. The retouching that I'll do on a headshot, it really is limited to removing distractions and things like blemishes, a hair that's out of place, a bit of dust that's on the clothes, or something of that nature. Whereas with my portrait work, the retouching process includes color grading. It includes I very often overlay textures to add extra depth to the image. I'll play around quite a lot with the contrast, separating out the color channels and playing individually with the contrast on those. I first started using Affinity about 2.5 years ago, I think, maybe 3 years ago. And really it's grown with me, or I've grown with it. I'm not sure which way around. I wasn't doing a lot of heavy duty retouching before I moved to Affinity. I used various other softwares and apps for what I needed. But it was only when I started using Affinity regularly that I started to have a need to do more detailed post-production work. And everything that I've done with it so far, I've learned either through trial and error or finding various tutorials online, some on the Affinity website, some created by other Affinity users on YouTube, and just picking up on those techniques and then adapting them to what I want to do with my work. But I think with all kind of image editing programs like Affinity, they're so vastly complex. I mean, I'd be very surprised if there's anyone who makes use of all of it. I can't imagine that I would ever need to make use of all of the features that are in there, and I'm quite sure that what I'm using is really just a small subset of what it's capable of. I think the creative process has lots of what you could call happy accidents in it. And I like to leave a lot of room for that kind of thing to happen. Some people I know like to go into a shoot with everything planned out to the last detail. I've never really been comfortable with that. I want to be confident that we're going to get something good. I want to make sure that the people I'm working with, I know that I can rely on them, or the idea is going to be executed more or less. But leaving a bit of room for things to go where they will, to develop as we're shooting, I think is really important for getting creative results. The downside of it, of course, is that sometimes you rely on having to correct things in post-production, or having to enhance things in post-production. And there's an image that I shot fairly recently that's got an example of both of those things. I shot this on a white seamless background. The texture and detail that you see in the background here is a product of the overlays that I used in Affinity in post-production. But there was this sort of gap here in the composition. The arms are pointing up this way, the hands are pointing up this way. The light is kind of traveling across the frame this way. So this corner was lighter than the rest of the frame. And so I got a bit more creative with my retouching and decided to add an element there. Just drew in a rectangle there and gave it a border. Then I blurred that border, maybe suggesting that it's a window, or maybe suggesting a piece of art that's hanging on the wall. And then I just gave that a different color to the rest of what's going on. So I went with a cool bluish tone, as a contrast to the warm greens and golds that are making up the palette of the rest of the frame. And I think it's a simple thing, but adding that in post-production just turned a very simple composition into something just a little bit more special, and made it a portfolio piece. The thing that makes one photographer stand out as compared to all the others in a, let's face it, a fairly saturated market is their uniqueness. And that's not something that you can engineer or fake. I think it's important to remain true to your own vision, the way that you see the world, or the way you see people, or the way you want to present people.